There's a country where not a single murder has happened in 10 years. No army, no airport, not even a single highway. And yet, it's the second wealthiest country on Earth. Few people have ever even heard its name. Liechtenstein. Tucked away in the Alps between Switzerland and Austria, it covers an area no bigger than a quarter of Seoul, yet its GDP per capita ranks among the highest in the world, rivaling Monaco, that famous playground of the rich. Almost no other country on Earth comes close. But here's the strange part. This country looks nothing like a wealthy one. Its streets are lined with farmland. Search as you might, you won't find a single supercar or yacht. So where exactly is all the money? And it gets stranger. In a country without a single soldier, one ruler has reigned for 36 years, without a gun or a blade to his name. How is that even possible? And why have the people never tried to bring him down? A country with barely 10 criminals. It won't sell citizenship for any price. More companies than citizens. And zero national debt. Why refuse an airport, cutting itself off from the world? Familiar to Europeans, yet a mystery to others. Today, we uncover the story of the wealthy nation in the Alps, Liechtenstein. First, let's understand how small this country is. Liechtenstein covers just 160 square kilometers. At its longest, it stretches only 25 kilometers, around 15 miles from north to south. It's about the size of Washington, D.C. It's also ringed by mountains on every side. To reach the sea, you'd have to cross at least 2 other countries, making it what's called a doubly landlocked nation. There are only 2 such countries on Earth, Uzbekistan and Liechtenstein. On geography alone, this is a country that should have stayed on the margins of the world. But the numbers tell a different story. Liechtenstein's GDP per capita tops $230,000, the amount of wealth a single person generates in a year. It's hard to picture what that really means. It puts Liechtenstein neck and neck with Monaco, the country usually called the richest on the planet, for the world's #1 spot. It's several times the average income of most developed nations. And yet, people who actually visit all come back saying the same thing. It simply doesn't look like a rich country at all. The cars on the road aren't pricey supercars, but the ordinary models you'd see anywhere. The buildings are uniformly low, and the surroundings look more like countryside. Even along the main road into the capital, a shop is hard to find. How can a country competing for the title of world's wealthiest be this modest? There's actually a particular mindset behind this, a kind of restraint, a refusal to flaunt wealth. People here can afford expensive cars. They simply choose not to. The prices, on the other hand, are brutally honest. In this country, which uses the Swiss franc, a single restaurant meal easily passes $70 or even $100. A train ticket runs $50, a supermarket sandwich $10, and even a cup of instant noodles costs more than $4. Which leaves one question. Why has such a wealthy country never built itself an airport? The answer is surprisingly simple. The whole country is hemmed in by mountains, leaving little flat ground to lay a runway. So to get here, you have to land in a neighboring country. The usual route is Zurich Airport in Switzerland. From there, you take a train to a small station near the border, then switch to a bus. An hour and a half to 2 hours in all. The view along the way is a curious one. You're heading toward one of the richest countries in the world. Yet outside the window, there's no city, only something closer to a village from a fairy tale. Old world buildings, mountain slopes, scenes of farm life. What greets you first isn't glamour, but warmth. And there's no border checkpoint to pass through. Somewhere between stepping off the train and onto the bus, the country has quietly changed around you. Switzerland and Liechtenstein flow into one another almost as if they were a single nation. And this is the first key to understanding Liechtenstein. The lack of an airport isn't just about a shortage of flat land. From the very start, this is a country that chose not to own much of anything for itself. Liechtenstein also has no army. But it wasn't always this way. The country abolished its military in 1868, more than 150 years ago. Behind that decision lies one of the most delightful stories in all of military history. In 1866, when Austria and Prussia went to war, Liechtenstein sent 80 soldiers to the alpine frontier to support its ally, Austria. But these troops never saw actual combat. Their mission was a fairly peaceful one, guarding a mountain pass, drinking wine, and smoking tobacco. Here's the remarkable part. When the war ended and the soldiers came home, the 80 who had marched out returned as 81, one more than they'd left with. Not only had they lost no one, they'd actually gained a man. To this day, no one quite agrees whether that 81st soldier was an Italian farmer or an Austrian officer who joined them along the way. In any case, soon after the war, the country's parliament reached a conclusion. For a nation this small, a costly army made no sense. And so, in 1868, Liechtenstein disbanded all of its armed forces and declared permanent neutrality. At the time, it looked reckless, but in the end, it proved a brilliant survival strategy. Through the two world wars that tore across the 20th century, Liechtenstein quietly endured, having removed any pretext for military involvement from the start. That's not to say there was no price to pay. During the First World War, sanctions against its neighbor, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, spilled over, bringing severe food shortages and industrial collapse. But by the Second World War, the country's monarch took up residence in Vaduz Castle for the first time and saw the nation through. Not with weapons, but with the choice of neutrality, Liechtenstein kept its territory whole through the heart of the war. So who protects a country with no army of its own? Its neighbor next door, Switzerland. In 1923, Liechtenstein signed a customs treaty with Switzerland. They effectively formed a single economic zone with no border. Liechtenstein uses the Swiss franc, and Switzerland handles its border security. Defense isn't all. Liechtenstein also outsources much diplomacy to Switzerland. Where it lacks an embassy, Swiss embassies handle its affairs. Liechtenstein often lacks embassies. Swiss ones step in. Outsourcing defense and diplomacy saves this small country over $200 million annually. But that raises another question. Why would Switzerland spend hundreds of millions every year to protect this tiny country? The answer isn't compassion, it's calculation. Switzerland doesn't help out of pity for Liechtenstein, but because it pays off, both economically and strategically. It may look like kindness toward a smaller neighbor, but it's really a product of pure self-interest. This philosophy of outsourcing shows up in crime and punishment too. The country's crime rate is among the lowest in the world. There are said to be barely 10 criminals in the entire nation, and reportedly not a single murder has occurred in roughly the decade since 2014. As a result, many people don't bother locking their doors on the way to work, and homes right along the main road often have no fence at all. So what happens with the rare serious offender? Anyone sentenced to more than 2 years isn't held here, but sent to neighboring Austria. And not for free, of course. Liechtenstein pays the cost of their imprisonment as well. For a small country, leaving it to a neighbor is far cheaper than running a high-security prison of its own. Its military, its diplomacy, its currency, even its prisons, rather than owning them. Liechtenstein chose to entrust them all to its neighbors. It's a relentlessly practical way of getting by, avoiding isolation while cutting costs at every turn. Now let's return to the strangest question we raised at the start. In a country without a single soldier, how has one ruler held power for 36 years? Liechtenstein is ruled by a monarch. Curiously, that monarch is called not a king, but a prince. The current ruler, Hans Adam II, took the throne in 1989 and has led the country ever since. But this country's monarchy is a different creature entirely from the others in Europe. Think of the royal families of Britain or Japan. There, the monarch is purely symbolic. Real governing power rests with parliament and cabinet. Liechtenstein's monarch is different. Under the constitution, sovereignty belongs jointly to the prince and the people. For any law to take effect, it needs both the people's approval and the prince's consent. And this prince wields real power directly. He can dissolve parliament, dismiss the cabinet, and veto any bill passed by the people's representatives, striking it down entirely. By now the question is unavoidable. Why do the people leave a ruler with such sweeping powers untouched? To find the answer, we have to go back to 2003. That year, the country held a referendum on a constitutional amendment that would expand the prince's powers even further. Here, Hans Adam II made a bold gamble. If the amendment failed, he announced, his entire family would leave the country and move to Vienna, Austria. Unsettled, the people voted to strengthen the prince's powers themselves. Faced with losing their monarch, they chose a powerful one who would stay. This wasn't a one-time fluke. In 2012, a referendum proposed the opposite, curbing the prince's powers. It was rejected by an overwhelming margin. The people themselves wanted a strong monarchy. So why do the people keep choosing this? Because their prince isn't a burden riding on the back of a poor nation. Quite the opposite. Far from living off state support, Liechtenstein's princely family is among the wealthiest in the world. The family owns 100% of a financial group called LGT, a giant wealth manager that handles the fortunes of the world's ultra-rich. The group is said to manage hundreds of billions of dollars in assets. So the prince here isn't a monarch holding out his hand to the state, but one who raises the country's standing with his own money. He keeps museums running and props up cultural institutions out of his personal fortune, not the national budget. The family's art collection has indeed been built up over centuries. Begun in the 17th century, the princely collection includes masterpieces by greats like Rubens and Rembrandt. In the heart of a tiny capital of 40,000 people, world-class museums sit clustered within just a few hundred meters of one another, the product of this family's wealth and eye for art. Interestingly, the aging prince no longer handles the day-to-day governing himself. On August 15, 2004, Hans Adam II handed the everyday running of the state to his eldest son, hereditary Prince Alois. The father remains the formal head of state, while the son is the one who actually runs the country. What's more, this monarch is far from authoritarian. The national holiday falls on August 15th. On that day, the castle at the foot of the mountains, normally open only to the prince, throws its gates wide to the public. The family serves free beer and refreshments, turning the capital into a giant party. Instead of solemn parades, there are brass bands and folk dancing. Grilled bacon and local wine. Fireworks light the night sky. A day when prince, people, and visitors mingle as one. This day reveals why this monarchy never wavers. Of course, this monarchy has its shadows. The most striking is the question of women's suffrage. Astonishingly, Liechtenstein was the last country in Europe to grant women the right to vote, not until 1984. And it didn't pass easily. After being voted down in 2 referendums, it barely scraped through on the third. The margin between yes and no across the entire country was just 119 votes. And in one district, the difference came down to a mere 3. Great wealth, deep conservatism, a strange contradiction. Liechtenstein's monarchy wears both of these faces at once. Now for another question. In a country this prosperous, you'd expect people to line up for the chance to live there. Yet Liechtenstein won't easily hand over its citizenship, no matter how much money is on the table. To live here, you first need a residence permit, and only those born in Europe are even eligible to apply. To gain permanent residency, you have to live here for a staggering 30 years. You'd think a small country would prize every person it could get, so why bolt the door this tightly? There are 2 reasons. The first is to protect what those already there have. In a country whose national wealth vastly outweighs its population, adding more citizens means splitting a limited pool of benefits with newcomers. The second is to protect its identity. With such a small population, even a slight rise in foreign-born voters could swing the country's direction overnight. They have no wish to see the current monarchy or the pro-business, low-tax path thrown off balance, and so the country sees no reason to take that risk by letting new citizens in. So who actually does the work here? In fact, more than half of Liechtenstein's workforce are foreign commuters who cross the border from Switzerland or Austria every single day. This setup produces a curious result. There are more jobs in this country than there are citizens. Even if every citizen worked, jobs would go unfilled. Companies must offer high salaries and benefits. And when a downturn forces cuts, it's the foreign commuters who go first, not the locals. Whatever recession may come, someone born in this country has little reason to fear losing their job. Born here with ambition, you can start your career at almost $70,000 annually. And here we come, face to face with something. Just how vast a difference the country of your birth can make to where your life begins. With the same talent and the same effort, the floor beneath your life shifts depending on the land you were born into. But the way this country invests in its people defies expectations once again. In Liechtenstein, education is entirely free. Kindergarten through university, fully government funded. For students abroad, the state covers tuition and living costs. Why go this far? Because this country has not a single natural resource. The belief that its only way to survive is through its people runs deep here. In a nation of just 40,000, even one person falling behind is a loss to the whole country. It aims to raise every child as a top expert. Too small to teach every field, it funds its youth to learn globally and return. With no resources, its people became the answer. This exacting attitude doesn't stop at people. In this country, they say you'll almost never see a stray dog on the street. The reason is intriguing. To own a dog, you have to pay a sizable tax and undergo lengthy training. No one takes on a pet on a whim. And if someone does abandon a dog, an implanted chip quickly reveals the owner and a heavy fine follows. A society that demands accountability down to the smallest everyday rule. This country's sense of order stands on exactly that kind of meticulousness. And yet, the dinner table in this wealthy country is surprisingly humble. The national dish is something called käsknöpfle, made from nothing but flour, eggs, and cheese, a kind of cheese-coated dough dumpling. It began as survival food, a meal poor farmers threw together from whatever they could find to get through the harsh alpine winters. Today, that humble dish is the country's signature. This wealthy country's national dish is simple farmers' food. This, more than anything, honestly portrays a nation that refuses to flaunt its riches. This brings us to the fundamental question. No resources, no army, 40,000 people. How did it become one of the richest? The first thing to note is that the very way this country came into being was unusual. Most nations are founded when a people rises up and declares independence. Liechtenstein is different. In the late 17th century, a wealthy Austrian noble family bought up 2 debt-ridden estates in order to qualify for a seat in the imperial assembly. One in 1699, another in 1712. The purchased lands merged, becoming a single principality in 1719. Why were these lands for sale? The ruling family was buried in crushing debt, from extravagance, tyranny, the 30 Years' War famine, and a brutal witch hunt. One family's ruin was another's opportunity. Today's wealthiest nation began with that deal, buying a bankrupt estate. This country was born not from independence, but from capital buying territory. The family who bought the land gave the country its name. This small principality became a sovereign state, ironically thanks to Napoleon, who toppled the Holy Roman Empire. Amid the chaos of the empire's collapse, Liechtenstein emerged, for the first time, as an independent state free from foreign interference. This origin is the key to understanding the Liechtenstein of today. From the very beginning, this country was something close to one enormous business. As recently as the mid-20th century, this was a poor farming nation growing potatoes and corn. In half a century, it became a high-tech industrial power. The first secret behind that, surprisingly, is manufacturing. We often see rich countries as finance-driven, but here, industry is nearly half the economy. Not mass production, but by cornering global niche markets. Hilti, with red power tools common on construction sites. Ivoclar Vivadent, whose dental materials are used globally. Intamin, which designs world-famous roller coasters. Though unfamiliar, these companies are irreplaceable in their fields. What's more, over half of the workforce keeping these companies running are foreigners who commute across the border. The country borrows the labor it lacks from its neighbors, while keeping the technology and capital at home. The second secret is finance. The corporate tax rate here is 12.5%, among the lowest in all of Europe, and so capital pours in from around the world. How much capital? In a nation of 40,000 people, more than 20,000 companies are registered. One company for every 2 residents, an almost unreal density. This is where the line comes from. More companies than citizens. The country also offers unusual corporate structures rarely found elsewhere. Vehicles known as foundations and anstalts, which the wealthy around the world have long used to manage and pass down their fortunes without revealing their identities. It's these intricate instruments that turned a small alpine nation into a channel for the world's money. There was a darker side, of course. This country was once notorious as a tax haven where dirty money gathered. After the 2008 financial crisis, under intense pressure from major powers, it quickly changed course. In 2009, it pledged to open tax information and accept only clean capital. Instead of hesitating, it rewrote its rules with remarkable agility. This was yet another way the country survived. And this country is fearless when it comes to marketing its wealth. The prime example is a scheme launched in 2010, renting out the entire nation. For $70,000 a day, you can rent the whole country for a day. On arrival, you're handed a symbolic key to the nation at the parliament, and you can rename the street signs after yourself, or even issue temporary currency bearing your own face. The irony is that not a single person ever actually rented the country. One couple who booked it for their wedding canceled after calling off the engagement, and the famous rapper Snoop Dogg was turned down on the grounds that he didn't fit the nation's image. But the scheme had already done its job, contract or no contract. It seared into the world's imagination the image of a most exclusive, secretive, wealthy nation. In the end, there's no single secret to Liechtenstein's wealth. Capital that bought up territory, manufacturing in niche markets, finance that drew world money, and cleverness to turn sovereignty into a product. It's the result of all these, layered one on another. Let's return to where we began. Farmland streets, low buildings, a mountain-ringed village. That the world's wealthiest country could be this quiet and plain still feels strange. But the closer you look, the clearer one thing becomes. Liechtenstein did not grow rich through vast territory, abundant resources, or a powerful army. If anything, the opposite is true. Because it had little, it chose not to own things outright. With little to defend, it moved all the more nimbly. It slipped into the gaps between great powers, carving out its own place. Less a nation-state, more a vast economic zone in the Alps, a country that turned the right of sovereignty more cleverly than anyone into money. And yet the questions it leaves behind remain: restraint amid wealth and a closed door to citizenship, a powerful monarchy and an equality between the sexes that arrived late. Holding all of these contradictions in its arms, this small country goes on quietly prospering even now. That small does not mean weak. Perhaps this country, hidden away in the Alps, is quietly telling us something its size on the map could never reveal.